Hello, Professor.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, good. What's up?
Oh, nothing. I just logged on into class earlier.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, glad you're here. Have I ever thought about taking a day off and then work is too much, so you end up not taking the day off? I mean, it's a little bit hard because with the lecture schedule, I can't really take a day off on a day where I'm giving lecture. And so it's not like a normal kind of thing like that. But there have definitely been days, not so much nowadays because now I have it more under control. But earlier on, I had to work weekends a lot just to keep up with prep and with grading. Yeah. How do I balance my schedule? Now I'm a lot better with it. So now, now like when I decide to take personal time, then I just kind of shut everything off. I think the for me at least the difficult thing was when I want to take personal time, but then I still kind of try to do work during that time, so then it's not really personal time anymore. And then it's always kind of on. And so for me, I kind of had to draw kind of a hard stop of when I'm not working, then I'm not going to work at all, and then that helps me enjoy my personal time more. It just kind of helps me be less stress in general. Mhm. Oh, Ohio was great. Yeah, it was a beautiful wedding. I'm really happy. Just really happy to be there. They're two really good friends of mine, so just really happy for them. And the whole thing was really beautiful. I'd never met their families before, because they're from Ohio, and so getting to meet their families and was really really nice. So yeah, overall, it was a great weekend. Tired though, it's always not easy to travel and then come back and teach right away, but recovering a little bit. Not so much. It's only a 3-hour difference. It's more just being tired from traveling. Our wedding in Kansas. Oh wow. Yeah. Yeah, it's always yeah, it's hard to travel for just for anything nowadays. But yeah, for a wedding, it's you have to be there for your friends, but it's a lot of times you're traveling there just it's for such a short amount of time that it's hard to really enjoy it because like it felt like we oh, that must have been it must have really killed the mood in Kansas. um yeah, so like it felt like I traveled for an entire day and I came in, I went to the wedding the next day, I was flying back already, and then both of those travel days are kind of like a wash because we spend so much time traveling. So yeah, I just wish we could spend more time there. Okay, it's 1 o'clock, so let's go to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Good, good. Thumbs up. Like it. Yep. Week 10, and so we are getting in the double-digit weeks now. And so now times are going to get real for the semester. So I know that especially I know a lot of you are seniors, a lot of you are juniors. You guys are really really busy with other stuff, and I know with the virtual instruction, it's really easy to go and watch the lectures later. But for those of you who come and see it live every day, I thank you. Um, it's definitely much different energy than lecturing to a full room versus a half room. So thank you guys. Okay, so the plan for today is we're going to continue our lecture notes on inflation. Okay, so I anticipate we should have no problems finishing up today, and so there's not too much left of it, and that'll be kind of the last real topic that we have for economics, right? And so there's gonna be a couple conceptual questions mostly, and a very quick computation question on the homework 5 on inflation. But besides that, I'm not going to push too hard on inflation because it is kind of a complicated topic, especially when you consider all the different complexities and subtleties involved. So we're not going to go too hard on inflation, but it's important to understand what it is and kind of just have a good understanding of how in general that can affect your economic calculations. Okay. And so that's what we're going to focus on. All right. Let's see. Oh, when is our midterm? Is our midterm coming up? Let me check. No, wrong class. Because our midterm should be coming up next week. Yep. So our midterm is next week, and so it'll probably be on the later half next week. So it'll be next Thursday. And so I owe you guys a study guide, and I owe you guys a review video, just like last time. Okay. And so you can look forward to the study guide and the review video, coming very soon. Okay. And so just as a reminder, let's have midterm 2. Okay, midterm 2 will be next Thursday. November, what is that? November 4. Okay. And so it'll be the exact same format as the last exam. And so it'll be taken over Canvas, and you'll have an hour and a half to do it. And so, but the subject for the exam is going to be different. Okay. And so it's not going to be cumulative. And so it's only going to cover the stuff that we've covered since the first midterm. And so that's rate of return, mostly rate of return analysis, taxes, replacement analysis, and inflation. And so I think those are going to be the main topics that you're going to be expected to know. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. And so I think, for this class in particular, I think the second exam, I think, catches people off guard. Because the first exam, and you guys saw, the averages are quite high for the first exam. So people do well in the first exam, and then the content for the second exam is a lot more difficult. And so, make sure you're keeping up with the homeworks, and that you're prepared for the exam. Yeah, it's a lot more material, and it's the problems themselves take a lot longer to do. And so usually for this class, the first exam average is up here, and then the second average is more down here, just because the content is a lot more difficult. And I think in general, just during this time of the semester, I think you guys are just a lot more busy with other stuff too. So yeah, it's tough. And so we'll do a good job reviewing in the review session on Friday. Yeah. Yeah, each problem is definitely harder. All right, and so I think that's all my announcements. And so, are there any questions I can answer before we get started? Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and get rolling. And so we're going to continue on with inflation. All right. And so the idea with inflation, and kind of one of the reasons we've been kind of ignoring it up to this time is, inflation has to do with the fact that in general, the prices for goods and the prices for services go up over time. Okay. Okay. So deflation is possible, and so it's definitely possible for prices to drop over long periods of time, but it's very, very rare. And so in general, you're going to have a general upward trend of prices. Okay. And to help us kind of quantify this, to help keep track of it, we left off last week on the concept of 2 different kinds of money. Okay. Right. And so the first type of money is called actual dollars. Okay. And so actual dollars is actual, physical money that you exchange for goods. Okay. Right. And so when you take out money from your wallet or you buy something online, and so that's actual money, because that's actual physical money that you have that you exchange for certain things. Okay. All right. And so the other type of money that we talked about was what's known as real dollars. Okay. And real dollars, is not a physical money. So this is not something that you actually have. So the money that you have, actually is not real. It's it's whatever you want it to be. Okay. But when we talk about real dollars here in this class, what we're talking about really is kind of a metric to measure purchasing power. Okay. And so the key thing with real dollars is that you always have to base it in a certain time period, right? And so you always have to base it within a certain year, because that's going to be, the year where you have certain amount of purchasing power. Okay. And so I think the kind of the easiest example that you can think about is, think about, and maybe your parents or your grandparents might say this, where, they talk about, how far $5 can get you, back when they were kids, right? And so you think about, maybe times in the 1970s, 1980s, right? And so the value of $5 back then is very different from the value of $5 now, okay? Okay. And so, probably a lot of you remember this, but, Subway ran a campaign called $5 footlongs, right? And so, what they says, you can buy a footlong sandwich for $5, right? And so if you think about nowadays, that's kind of, a little bit crazy. And it hasn't even been that long since Subway ran that campaign. But the price of bread and the price of sandwich ingredients has gone up, and so Subway doesn't offer this nearly as often as they used to. And so it used to be almost basically every day that you get a $5 footlong, but now it's gone, because the value of $5 today, the amount of purchasing power $5 has, is not nearly as much as what it was maybe 10 years ago when Subway was offering the $5 footlong. Okay. And so that's what we mean by real dollars. And so real dollars represents, what is the actual value of goods that you can get with this amount of money in that amount of time. Okay. All right. And so in another concept that we talked about last week was the different interest rates, right? And so when you have actual dollars and you put that into a bank, that's always grown with what's known as the market interest rate. Okay. Whereas your purchasing power, your real dollars, this was always grown with the real rate. Okay. And so if you're converting between actual dollars and actual dollars, you would use the market rate. If you're converting between real and real, you would use the real rate. Okay. And we talked about those 4 different rules that we had for performing conversions. Okay. All right. So I'm not going to go over the 4 rules again, because I think that would take a little bit too long. But I will illustrate those 4 rules in the next example. Okay? And so this is the example that I wanted to do at the end of class last week, but we just didn't get a chance to. But before I jumped into that, I thought it would be good just to kind of review kind of these key concepts so that we can kind of hit the ground running with this example. Okay. All right. Any questions on this? Okay. All right, so let's do an example to kind of show each of these concepts in action. Hopefully that kind of makes things a little bit more clear. All right. And so let's say that in 1965, a certain sports stadium was constructed at the cost of $1.2 million. Okay. After it was finished, the owner of the team thought that eventually we're going to have to renovate, or we're going to have to kind of build a new stadium to replace this. Okay, and so what he did was he invested $1.2 million, another $1.2 million into a into a high yield savings account to pay for a replacement in 2020. Okay. And the interest rate there, and the interest rate that the owner invested this in was 8%. Okay. And since this is a bank, right? So this is essentially a high yield savings account. This 8% here is a market rate. Okay, and the replacement was set to be built in 2020. Okay, all right, and so if we assume an inflation rate of 6%, okay, and so each year, the price of goods is going to go up by 6%. We want to answer the following. All right, and so first thing, since we have the market rate and we have the inflation rate, we can use those to compute the real interest rate. Okay. And then once we do that, we can characterize the initial $1.2 million purchase in terms of actual and real dollars. Okay. Okay. Right, and so basically the second part of that problem is, we have that initial $1.2 million purchase. And so, we're going to describe what that actually means in terms of, actual and real. Okay. Because remember, real dollars have a base year, right? And so, we're going to describe what that $1.2 means. 1.2 million is in, what the base year for that is. Okay. All right, part B. And so part B is, part B has to do with the $1.2 million investment. Okay. And so with that $1.2 million investment, he's basically going to cash that out, 55 years into the future, right? And so in part B, we're going to compute the actual amount of money that the owner withdrew from that account. Okay. Okay. All right, part C. And so part C is kind of an addition to part B. And so part B, we're computing the actual dollar amount. In part C, we're going to compute the real worth of that investment in terms of 1965 purchasing power. Okay, and what we'll see is that in part C, there are a couple ways that we can do. Okay. All right. Any questions on this before we start to do the problem? Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and do the problem. Okay. All right. Part A. So part A, the first thing we're going to compute is the real interest rate. Okay. And so the real interest rate, remember, we have the formula for that. And so if we're given the market rate and we're given the inflation rate, we can just compute it from those things. Okay. So remember, the real interest rate is I prime. And so this is going to be I minus F divided by 1 plus F. Okay. Where I, remember, is the market rate and F is the inflation rate. And so if we compute that, we get 1.887%. Okay. And so after adjusting for inflation, we can say that that his investment is going to grow by 1.887% in terms of purchasing power. And so the value of the goods that he can purchase is growing by that much each year. Okay. All right. And so now let's characterize the initial $1.2 million investment. Okay. Or the initial cost. I'm sorry. Okay. And so remember this, and so this $1.2 million, this was actually spent in building the stadium. Okay. Okay. And so from that perspective, since the $1.2 million was actually physically handed over to the builders and all the vendors and all that stuff, this is actual money. Okay. Okay. Because it was actually used to purchase stuff, right? And so it's physically exchanged between people, right? But even beyond that, it also represents some real dollars too, right? And so, you can't, when you talk about money, it doesn't have to be just one or the other. And so, when you have actual money and you actually exchange it for goods, that means you had that much purchasing power at that time as well, okay? And so also represents $1.2 million $1.2 million worth of purchasing power in 1965. Okay, because all the goods and all the all the services that were bought with this 1.2 million, this was done in 1965. Okay, and so in that sense, this 1.2 million also represents real dollars with a base of 1965. Okay. And so it's both of these at the same time, right? And so it was actual money that he had back then because he used it to exchange for goods. But this also represents the value of, what $1.2 million was back then. And so it's both actual money and also real money at the same time. Okay. All right. Any questions on this so far? Okay. All right, and so that's part A. Okay, and so part B, we're going to compute the actual dollar amount that he withdrew in 2020. Okay. And so the actual dollar amount withdrawn, we're basically going from actual money in 1965 to actual money in 2020. Okay. Okay. And so since we're going from actual to actual, then the interest rate that we use for this is the market rate. Right? Because whenever you're going from actual money to actual money, then you use the market rate. Okay? And so the computation for this is one that we've done a million times now. And so we're going to compute a future worth. Okay. And so the future worth of the 1.2 million okay. This is going to be, we need an F over P factor. We're going to do this for 8% because that's the market rate of the savings account that the owner deposited into. Okay. And we're going to advance it forward in time by 55 years because that's the amount of time that he's investing the money. Okay. And so if we look up this this conversion factor in the table, then what we get is, after performing the arithmetic, $82,701,600. Okay. And so it's a lot. It looks like a lot of actual money, right? And so you can see the money grew by basically 80 times. Okay. Okay. And so this is the actual dollar amount. Okay. Right. And so, it might seem like when you're looking at this number, the fact that he bought the stadium back then, or he paid to build the stadium back then for 1.2 million, that he'd be able to build like 80 stadiums like this, right? But that's not the case. And so we know, and so we know that through inflation, the fact that this is taking place 55 years in the future, that's 55 years worth of inflation that's being applied to the prices of the building materials, of the price of staff, of paying for the vendors, right? Paying to rent equipment. And so this may seem like a lot of money, but prices have also been going up over these 55 years. Okay. And so to get a real sense of the actual value of the new stadium that he can create, we need to do this calculation in terms of real dollars, which is what we're going to do in part C. Okay. All right. Any questions on this? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and do part C. Right? All right, so remember in part C, what we want to compute is the real dollar amount of the investment in terms of 1965 purchasing power. All right, so there's a couple ways to do this, and it depends on which rule that you want to use. Okay, and so the first way that you can do this is to start with the fact that when he made this initial investment, and so when he made this investment in 1965, that was a real dollar amount of $1.2 million in 1965. Okay. Okay. And so, this $1.2 million represented $1.2 million worth of purchasing power in 1965, and he actually put that investment in 1965. Okay. If we fast forward that to today, and so we want to find out, what's the value of that, what's the value of that investment in terms of 1965 purchasing power, right? And so what we want essentially from this is real dollars. Okay, base 1965. Okay. But instead of evaluating this in 1965, which is the initial part, the initial cost of the investment, we're going to be evaluating this in 2020 after 55 years has passed. Okay. Okay. Right. Because this is essentially what the problem is asking for here, right? And so the right side of the arrow is kind of what we're looking for. Okay. And so if we look at this kind of diagram here, so because we're going from real dollars in one time period to real dollars in another time period with the same base, right? In this case, this is going to be, I believe, rule number 2 in our table from last time. Okay. And so in this case, we're going to use the real interest rate, okay, which we computed in part A. All right, and so the conversion is as follows, right? And so the conversion is, and so we have F, and so the initial cost of the investment is 1.2 million. Okay. We need an F over P factor because we're moving this into the future, right? And because we're moving it between 1965 and 2020, even though the base year is still the same. And so, this is all representing purchasing power in 1965. It's just that, we're advancing this forward, 55 years, okay? And we're growing it at the real interest rate. Okay. And remember, the real interest rate in this problem is 1.887%. And we're going to grow this for 55 years. Okay. All right. So for this, we can't use the compound interest tables because we don't have a table for 1.887%. And so you're going to need to do this with the formulas. And so if you do this, you get 3.355 million. Okay. And so what does this tell us, right? And so this tells us that, through his investment, his original 1.2 million is going to grow to about 3.355 million in terms of purchasing power in 1965. Okay. And so if you do kind of just a naive comparison, so if you say that the original stadium was worth $1.2 million in 1965 money. Okay. This new stadium is going to be worth $3.355 million in terms of 1965 money. Okay. Basically, what you can say from this is that the new stadium, even though there's been inflation that occurred over the last, 55 years, the investment was growing at a faster rate than inflation was growing. Okay. And so what this is telling us is that the new stadium which is going to be worth about $3.3 million in terms of 1965 money, is going to be about 3 times nicer, or 3 times, better than the original one. Almost 3x. Okay. Right. And so this is a very different answer than what we got for part B. So remember, in part B, we said that the actual amount of money that he withdrew from this account was about 82 million, right? It's about 82,700,000, right? And so the new stadium that he's going to build with that money is not 82 times better than the original one, because prices have been going up this whole time. And so when you do this analysis with real dollars, you can see that, we still end up with a better stadium, because our market rate is outstripping our inflation rate. It's just not nearly as high, or not nearly as that much better as the actual dollars made it seem. Okay, and so we only end up with the stadium that's about 3 times better, which is still really nice. So, and you're talking at 3 times better of a huge football stadium. That's pretty nice. Yeah. But yeah, the amount isn't as high as as part B made it seem like. Yeah. All right, any questions on this? Does that kind of make sense why we did all these calculations? Our question. So what do I mean by 3 times better again? Yeah. So the 3 times better, what I get from that is the fact that the value of the new stadium in terms of 1965 purchasing power is about 3.3 million. And so if you take the ratio of 3.3 million divided by 1.2, it's not exactly 3, but it's close to 3. And so because the real value of the new stadium is going to be almost 3 times higher, maybe it's like 2.8 times higher than the original one, then you can buy that much better of a stadium compared to the original one. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, and so that's one way that you can do part C. And so part C, you can do it all within real and real. Another way you can do part C is you can use rule number 3 from our rule book from before, and that's the only rule that we have that converts between actual and real. Okay, and so this will be C alternative. Okay. All right. And so another way that we can do part C is to basically notice the fact that if we take the answer for part B, okay, and so our answer for part B, remember, was 82,701,600. Okay, what this represented here was was actual dollars in 2020. Okay, because that's actual money that the person is withdrawing from their account in the year 2020, right? And so if we want to put this in terms of real purchasing power based in 1965, right? And so we're basically converting between, actual dollars in one time period to real dollars in another time period, okay? I would say this is real purchasing power base 1965, sorry. Okay. The way that we can do this is we can use the inflation rate, and we use the inflation rate to strip away inflation from the actual dollar amount. Okay. Okay. Because this $82 million, it seems really high, but when you adjust for inflation, the fact that prices have also been going up 6% each year, this is not going to get you nearly as much stuff. Okay, and so another way that we can do this calculation is we do basically, we say that the amount that we want is $82 million. Okay. And the conversion that we're going to do for this is a P over F, because we want to basically remove, we're going to basically remove 55 years of inflation from this amount of money. Okay. And so if we do that, we need a P over F factor for that. Okay. The inflation rate is 6%. And the amount of years that we're going to take away inflation was 55 years. Okay. All right. And so this calculation is a little bit more convenient because we can look this up in the table because we're working with a 6% inflation rate. Right. And what we get from this is 3.3 million, $57,000. Okay. Right. And so what we did from this calculation is that we're saying that, okay, in today's actual money, right? And so actual money that we have in our account today, we have 82 million. Man, I wish I had 82 million in my bank account, right? And so if we want to talk about, how much actual stuff that can get us in 1965, that means what this is saying that, that 82 million can only get us 3.3 million's worth of stuff back in 1965. Okay. And so this is the exact same answer, or almost the exact same. I think we're off by 2,000, just because of rounding. And so this is basically the same answer that we got on the previous page where we just used the real interest rate. Okay. But this is just another way that you can approach it. Right. And so this is kind of just another mindset that you can use. But both methods are perfectly valid. And so, use whichever one that you feel, more comfortable with. Okay. All right. Any questions on this? Okay. All right. So hopefully that example makes it a little bit more clear about what the definitions are between the different types of money. Okay. And how to convert between them. Okay. All right. And so, another thing that you can see from this example is that inflation makes a huge difference, right? Like we're talking about, on the one hand, we have 82 million, which seems like a lot, but when we take away inflation, we only have 3.3 million's worth of stuff. And so, whether you're accounting for inflation or not in your calculations makes a big difference, right? And this is especially true for economic calculations that take place over a long period of time. Okay. And so we've done problems before, like we've done problems in the homeworks, and we've done problems in the class. Oh, question, sorry, I just missed that. And so the question is, why do I do P over F and not F over P? Yeah, because we're kind of transporting this money back in time, back to 1965, and so because of that, we use P over F to take this $82 million which we have in 2020 back to the purchasing power back in 1965. And so since we're moving that money back in time, we use P over F and not F over P. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Professor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you go back one page?
Yeah.
So at the bottom it says we have the found value, but you said in 1965. Why is it not 2020?
So this is 3.3. This is the money that you actually have is in 2020, but if we want to basically frame that money in terms of what we could actually buy back in 1965. And so this is $3.3 million worth of stuff that we could have bought in 1965. And so that's why I put that 1965 there.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, and so inflation makes a big difference, and we've done problems where we've looked at problems that take place over 10, 15 years, 20 years time horizon, right? And so it kind of seems like a big deal that we're not accounting for inflation, especially when things are going up each year. Okay, and so one example of this is that we've done so many examples where we've assumed the maintenance cost is the same, over a long period of time, every single year. Okay. But and that might be reasonable for maybe like 2 or 3 years, but once you start to get 4 or 5 years, then the cost of hiring a person to maintain your equipment, the cost of replacement parts, all of these are going to go up. And so this assumption of uniform maintenance costs is actually not really valid for for long periods of time. Okay. And so does this mean that everything that we've done up to this point has not been useful or has not been valid? And so it's on the one hand you could see it like that, but kind of implicitly what we've been assuming up to this point is that we've been doing all of our analysis in terms of real dollars. Okay? Okay. In particular, we've been assuming that we've been doing our analysis in terms of real dollars with the base year of year 0. Okay. And so when we do our economic calculations, we say that we're gonna frame everything in terms of purchasing power in the initial year, right? And so, when we purchase, when we purchase a piece of equipment and we're going to plan out its maintenance, all of that is in terms of purchasing power today, right? And so what we say is that, when we plan out our maintenance schedule, we say that, the maintenance, this year is going to cost, let's say $5,000. And then we're going to assume that $5,000 is consistent for, 5-10 years. But that $5,000 is in terms of purchasing power today, okay? And so that doesn't say anything about what the purchasing power is going to be like in the future, because in reality, the price for this maintenance is actually going to go up, okay? Right, and so if we assume that all of the money values and all of the interest rates that we're using are real, that allows us to kind of do what we have been doing, without any modifications. Okay? Okay. And so that's the caveat. And so when you go back and look at all the calculations we've been doing up to this point, just think about it and say that everything we've been doing has just been with real dollars and real interest rates. Okay. All right. And so yes, inflation does make a big difference on these calculations, but when you assume everything is in terms of real dollars, then you can kind of ignore it. Okay. And that's basically what we've been doing up to this point. Right? All right. Okay. So any questions on this? Okay. All right. And so let's see. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead a little bit just because I want to make sure I get to these concepts, and then we'll double back and do the other example. But the next thing I want to cover is called price indices, okay? And these are actually pretty cool. Right. And so price indices are basically a way for the government to track the prices of goods, throughout time. Okay. Right. Because all the problems that we've been doing up to this point has assumed a consistent inflation rate, right? And so we say that the price of all goods has been going up by this rate. Okay, but in reality, that's not true, because in reality, different goods and different services will inflate at different rates. Okay. Okay. And that's important to keep track of, because it's that's what it's because that's how you can really kind of track how the market is going. Okay. And so price indices are kind of the way that this is done. Okay. And the government puts out a report every few years that shows the price indices across many different indexes. Okay. All right. And so the way price indexes work is that they kind of express the percentage increase of the price of a good as a score. Okay. Okay. And so, when you look at a government report of price indexes, what you'll see is that they'll state, what the starting year is, or what the base year is. Okay. And so from the base year, in the base year, what the government does is it looks at the prices of all goods in that year. Okay. Okay. And then once they've tracked all the prices, all the goods in that year, then that price is assigned a score of 100. Okay. Okay. And so the starting price index for every good is 100. Okay. And then each year after this year, then what the price index will do is it'll take the ratio of what the new price of the good is compared to what it was in the base year, and then assign it a score above or below 100. Okay. All right, and so I have the equation for that on the next page, but before I go there, are there any questions on this? Okay. All right. And so then in subsequent years, price of good okay. And so the price index, which we call LCI, okay, is going to be the cost of the good in year N divided by the base costs. Okay. And then you're going to multiply it by 100. All right. Okay, and so as an example, let's say that let's say that we have a base year of 2000. Okay. And so let's say that in the year 2000, the price of a Subway sandwich was $5. Okay. Okay. And so if we compare that to the price of a Subway sandwich today, it's actually been a while since I've been to Subway. I used to go to Subway almost every day when I was in school, just because it was so reasonable, and you got full off just $5. But I think today you can probably get a decent sandwich for let's say $7.50. Okay. Or make it more interesting, we'll say $7.20. Okay. All right, and so the price index for a Subway sandwich Or it costs $10. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Ike's, yeah, I've tried Ike's. Ike's is very good. My fiance loves Ike's too. Yeah, so we usually go there. So that's part of the reason I don't go to Subway anymore, because now I live with my fiance. She doesn't like Subway. All right, and so the price index for Subway sandwiches, assuming that it's 720, is we're going to take the ratio of 720 and 5. Okay. And we're going to multiply this by 100. Okay. So let me pull up MATLAB, so I have it open. So we do 720 divided by 5. And so we get 144. Okay. Right. And so on the government report, what all you'll see is just this number right here. Okay. And so if you look, and so the government table is not going to, the government data is not going to have Subway sandwich on there, but for other goods you'll see the price index listed as just a single 3-digit number. Sometimes it's 4-digit depending on the good. And so this basically tells you that the price of Subway sandwiches has increased by 44%. Yeah, it's LCI. So LCI stands for I forget what the L stands for, but the CI stands for cost index. Yeah. Yeah. So I have it as LCI in my notes, but I kind of forgot what the L stands for. And so as part of your homework, I'm having you look at the government report for this, and you can actually see the price indexes for all different kinds of goods. And so it's actually really interesting to see how how certain goods have increased dramatically over the years. And so I think last time I looked at the report, I think the base year that they had was like something in the 80s, and so I think their base year was like 1982, 1984 or something like that, right? And so they took kind of the average of those years, and that's the base, right? And so if you look at how things like healthcare, how things like car prices, how things like gas have increased over that time. I think another really interesting one is tobacco. The price of tobacco over between the 80s and today. Considering all of the regulations and all of the kind of anti-tobacco propaganda that's and I don't support tobacco. I don't smoke, and I think it's bad for you. But to see how the prices of those things have jumped over this time is super interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it might be labor. Yeah, it might be one of those things. I think it's listed in the government report too. And so if you check the government report, it'll say LCI. It'll tell you what that stands for. Yeah. And so definitely check it out. So I think in the homework I have a link to that exact report, or I tell you what to Google. And so even besides the homework, I think it's really interesting to see how the prices of things have evolved over the years, and just how crazy inflation has been over that 40-year period. The prices of some things have jumped by 15 times sometimes. And so it's crazy to think about how little things cost back then. Yeah. All right. Any questions on price indices? Okay. All right. And so the last thing I want to cover is kind of based along this idea of price index, is that how to do calculations when different goods inflate at different rates. And so let's do an example of how you can take this into account for your calculations. Okay. All right. And so let's say that you work for a utility company, and you're put in charge of estimating all the utility costs for a certain facility. And so let's say that this facility is planned for 25 years of use. And we're going to assume a really high market interest rate of 35%. All right. And so the main utilities that you're considering are electricity, water, and natural gas. Okay. And so let's say that electricity costs are going to cost you $55,000 in the first year. Okay. Water is going to cost you $18,000 in year one. Okay. And natural gas is going to cost $38,000 in year one. Okay. All right. And so over the 25 years, 25 years is a long time. And so the cost of these utilities is going to go up each year, right? But they're going to go up at different rates, okay? Kind of just based on their demand and kind of based on how the market's going for each of those, right? And so let's assume that over the 25 years, each of these utilities is going to have a constant inflation rate per year. And so let's say that for electricity, the demand for electricity is going to go up over the years. And so this is going to inflate at a rate of 8.5% each year. Okay. We'll say the cost of water is going to inflate at a rate of 5.5% each year. And then natural gas, we're going to say, is going to inflate at a rate of 6.5% each year. Right. Okay, and so for this problem, I think the actual example did this for the full 25 years, but we don't have that kind of time to do that many calculations. And so for this problem, we're going to estimate the yearly cost of utilities for the first 5 years. Okay. Then we're going to compute the present worth of those. Okay. And since we're going to be performing inflation on these, all these calculations are going to be in terms of actual dollars. All right. And so basically, we're going to make a table where in each column of the table, we're going to have the list of the different utilities. And, we're going to see the cost of those utilities are going to go up, each year, from there. Okay. And so that's going to make our yearly utility costs go up each year. Okay. And then all of that is just due strictly to inflation. All right. Any questions on this? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and do the calculations. Okay, and so let's go ahead and make our table. Okay, and so we'll have one column for the year. And so we're only going to do this for the first 5 years. Okay. And so let's look at the price for electricity. Water, natural gas. And then once we're done with each of those, we can sum it up and find the total. Okay. All right, so we know how much each of these utilities are going to cost in the first year. And so let's go ahead and fill that first row in. Okay. And so electricity we know is going to cost $55,000. Water is going to cost $18,000. And then gas is going to cost $38,000. Okay. All right, and so if we add this across the rows, then the total cost for utilities in that first year is going to be $111,000. Okay. All right, and so now we're going to estimate, what the cost of the utilities are for each of them each year, given that each of them is going to inflate at a different rate. Okay. And so if we look at electricity, we know that electricity is going to be growing at a rate of 8.5% each year. Okay. And so each row in this table, we're going to multiply by 1.085 compared to the previous row. Okay. Water. So water we know is growing by 5.5%. And so this is going to be multiplied by 1.055. Okay. And then natural gas is growing by 6.5%. And so we're going to multiply this by 1.065. Okay. All right. And so if we multiply 55,000 by 1.085, then what we get is 59,675. Okay. And so that's an 8.5% increase over 55,000. Okay. And then if we do another 8.5% increase of over 59,000, then what we get is 64,747. Okay. Then we increase by 8.5% again, then we get 70,251. And we multiply by 8.5% again, we get 76,220. Okay. And so very quickly, you can see that the price of electricity is growing by quite a lot, because 8.5% inflation is pretty big, all things considered. All right, so water. And so water, we're going to grow by 5.5% each year. And so in year 2, it's going to be 18,990. Year 3 is going to be 20,034. Year 4 is going to be 21,136. And then year 5, we have 22,299. Okay. Right. And for gas, we're going to grow this by 6.5% each year. And so we're going to go from 38,000 up to 40,470. Okay. Then 43,101. Then 45,000. 902, and then 48,886. Okay. All right. And so with inflation, you can see our price is going up each year, and then our total utility cost is going to go up a lot as well, right? And so in year 2, our total utility cost is 119,135. For year 3, it's 127,882. Okay. Year 4, it's 137,289. And year 5, we have 147,407. Okay. All right. And so last step in this problem, is to take our yearly maintenance costs and then convert it to a present worth. Okay. And so accounting for inflation for each year, we get the present cost, the present worth of the utility cost to be 273,767.80. Okay. Right. And so the actual dollar amount of the present worth is that much. Okay. All right. And so when things when different goods inflate at different rates, it's not that difficult to account for it. It's just you have to do each one individually. Okay. And so you don't, instead of having one inflation rate that covers the whole problem, you instead have individual ones for different goods. And then if you just organize your calculations in a table like this, it's not that bad to to keep track of. All right. Any final questions before we close up for today?
I have a question.
Sure. What's up?
So the rates are uniform, right?
Yes.
They're not supposed to be exponentially.
No. Yeah. So they're I mean, they compound on each other, and so each year is a growth on the previous year. And so the formula that we use, and so let's say that you want to compute, what the prices are, 5 years in the future, you would use our classic FP formula. Just like that, because each year it grows by a certain percentage on the previous year. And so the amount that it increases each year is not the same, but the percentage increase is the same.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
Can you quickly flip through pages 1 through 5? My internet crashed for 10 minutes.
Okay.
All that.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll do this, but for everyone else, thank you guys for coming today. On Thursday, we're going to do a quick kind of a side story workshop on entrepreneurship. And so, I'm not going to test you on anything on that, but it's just kind of an interesting thing to do. And so, today is kind of the cutoff point. And so our midterm is going to be next Thursday. And so, today is going to be the last day of content that's going to go into that midterm. Okay. All right. So thank you guys for tuning in today. Hope you guys enjoyed the lecture. Hope you guys have a good rest of your afternoon. And I will see you on Thursday.
Would you
Professor?
be? Oh,
Sorry. Was the whole table in actual dollars, Professor?
Yes, the whole table was in actual dollars. It's because because we're inflating it each year, then we're counting for inflation.
Right. And the last step you did was you just made a cash flow and then just put it as PW, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I was gonna ask you are you planning to make a review,
Yes.
like a video?
Yep.
over the weekend?
Same thing as midterm 1. And so I'm going to put out a study guide. Probably this afternoon. I do have to finish up a couple of things first, and then I'll record a review video on Friday, just like I did for the first midterm.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Take care, Professor.
You too.
All right, cool. I'm just taking pictures. Sorry, so you can just skip to the next one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All right, cool. This is where I jump back in finally. All right, sweet. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I'll try to catch you Thursday.
Okay. Yep. See you Thursday. All right, Brandon, Joshua, any more last minute questions? Okay, all right, so I'm gonna go ahead and close the call. So I'll see you guys Thursday.